What this is today is basically it's a bit of an outline on our responsibilities as councillors. So I'll get Chris to make a little bit more of a comment in the opening, but I'll get Chris to open with the Karakia. Thank you.
Morning, councillors. Whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia makina ki uta, ki mataratara ki tai, he aka ana, te arakura, tio, he huka, he hohu, he hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Chris. Just quickly with apologies. So I do have an apology from Councillor Hodge and Councillor Downard. In the room, we currently have Councillor Smith, Councillor Strange, Councillor Maguire, Councillor Holmes, Councillor Raymer, Councillor Cookson, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Stoic, and myself. Online, we have Councillor Nicol and Councillor Dunbar Smith. And like to welcome our guests from OIA. At the end of the table there, we have Leon and Richard and Belinda, and of course, Paul Connell, who a number of you will already know. So I'll just hand to Chris now to just give us a quick outline on the program today.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. It's lovely to have you here in the Office of the Auditor General. Appreciate you coming. Councillors, the OAG offers this type of training. It's kind of part of the induction process, really, to understand what the role of the Office of the Auditor General is and to talk about probably important parts of your roles. From my perspective, having external auditors is one of those safeguards and protections for council, for yourselves, and for myself as the Chief Executive. So we also do internal audits with our own internal auditors as well. But having that external approach is something about transparency and public confidence, which I'm sure will be touched on. Of course, the OAG has a number of functions in which they do that. And you might be familiar at the end of last year that OAG released a report on council's preparedness for flood risks around the country. And they had done a deep dive into two councils, ourselves and Tasman District Council at the time. And so just as an example, something recently, very important, get feedback for ourselves, but also for the nation to get some insights there. So Warren, that's probably all I'd say. It's a great opportunity to hear from the OAG, and apparently lucky to have them all here today because low cloud meant that the plane nearly didn't land. I don't know about you, Liz, but it wasn't too low cloud out our way this morning, but we both live quite close to the airport.
Yeah, no, a little bit strange. I did hear on the radio coming in a number of flights delayed and cancelled out of Auckland for fog. So we're not the only one that suffers from a little bit of mist. So I'll hand over to you guys to lead us through. I believe there is a slide pack. Jess is in charge. Just if you're familiar while she's doing that, the mic, the button on the right-hand side is on and just nice and close. And that allows everyone online to hear. Thank you.
Thank
Richard,
you.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for the welcome and introduction. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Richard Harbert. I'm the Sector Manager for the Waikato and Bay of Plenty regions. With me, I have Linda Reinhardt. Linda's our Legal Manager at the Office of the Auditor General, and Leon Vieteze. Leon is your appointed auditor. And I'll let each of those introduce themselves when they come to speak. But just a little bit about my background while I'm speaking. My background is in local governments. My most recent position in local government, I was 15 years as Director of Planning and Regulatory Services at Upper Hutt City Council. So I don't have an audit or finance background, but hopefully bring a difference and a balance of skill sets to the work that the office does. Thanks, Jess. Could you go to the next slide? So in terms of our areas of focus today, they're there up for you, but this is your session, so we're happy to you in terms of where you want to dwell. Just to say that we have allowed the most time for the conflicts of interest section. We've got up to an hour for a workshop type format on that. I'd like to start, Jess, next slide, thanks. I'd like to start with an introduction from our new Auditor General who started in position in July of this year, Grant Taylor. Jess, could you go to the link on the left?
Kia ora tātou. My name is Grant Taylor. I'm the Auditor General for New Zealand. First of all, it's my privilege to congratulate you on your successful election campaign. Congratulations. Local government plays a critical role in ensuring successful delivery of public services to New Zealand communities throughout the motu. Your role as governors of these local councils is a key part of ensuring resources are deployed to those issues that matter for your communities. So congratulations again. You'll be working with my team throughout the audit and various other interactions we play with your council, so we look forward to those interactions. I thought I'd take the opportunity to share with you the 4 priorities I have for my term as Auditor General. First of all, modernisation of our audit practice to make sure the way in which we're delivering our core audit services is a contemporaneous approach. Secondly, value for money. We will be working with your council to ensure that we're able to help you answer value for money questions for your community. Thirdly, performance reporting, a topic well canvassed across most public entities. We're currently in the middle of a select committee inquiry at Parliament, which will have some natural flow-on consequences for the way in which councils report their performance to communities. And finally, an enduring focus on how public services are delivered to underserved communities, Māori, disabled communities and other cohorts. I really look forward to working and engaging with you all throughout my term. Ka pai.
Jess. So, yeah, Grant started in July of this year, and he's an independent. Sorry, July of last year. Did I say July of this year? Sorry, yeah. He's appointed for a single term of 7 years. He's appointed as an officer of Parliament, so he's appointed by Parliament rather than the government, independent of the government. The reports to Parliament about what we find through the work, inquiries, performance reporting, and the audits that we undertake. The annual audits that we undertake account for around 90% of our workload. We are responsible for auditing the entire public sector. That's related to controlled organisations and schools, state-owned enterprises and the like. Our role goes beyond simple financial audit, so we also look at non-financial performance. And that's increasingly important in terms of an ability of an organisation to demonstrate value for money and being accountable to the public and transparent and clear in what it's achieving with the money, the public money that's being spent. And you'll be aware that our major role in terms of auditing councils is looking back and auditing your annual reports and looking forward as we audit your long-term plans and related consultation documents. And for all of these documents, we consider whether they're based on reasonable underlying information and that they meet the purpose outlined in the Local Government Act. So as Chris has mentioned, they offer assurance to yourselves as governors that the information presented in those documents about your council is reasonable. But equally importantly, they also offer that assurance to your community. In terms of discretionary work, so around 10% of our time, we look to undertake performance audits. And as Chris has again mentioned, we issued a report around flood mitigation for your council and Tasman in December of last year. And we undertake about 12 to 15 of those performance audits each year. And that's our program around performance audits is set out in our annual plan. And we, like you, have a similar cycle. We consult on a draft annual plan and our draft work program in around April of each year. So we're working on that currently. Another smaller portion of our work is relating to inquiries. So we will look at a matter on occasion to do with how an organisation has been using its public resources, where there's a suggestion that things haven't been going appropriately. So we consider those matters and we report on those matters to Parliament. Grant mentioned value for money as one of his stated priorities, and I just wanted to touch on that. It's always been there as a key core consideration for you as governors and for your organisation. But I guess increasingly it's in the spotlight as the public sector is faced with limits on its resources, increasing ratepayer expectations, and the issue of trust and confidence in public sector and the use of public funds comes increasingly to the fore. You're faced with escalating costs. Of councils often have an increasing capital works programme, and those funding constraints associated with borrowing limits, affordability for ratepayers for rates, and those cost considerations. Champion value for money and a value for money culture in your organisation, in your role as councillors. But it's not an easy thing to fix in terms of being fixed on it and bringing it to the bear in terms of your assessments of the services and the products and the capital program that you're delivering. It requires an understanding of costs and cost drivers in your organisation, how those affect the delivery and sustainability of resources, and of course the achievement of outcomes. But secondly, that information then needs to be integrated into your planning, reporting, monitoring and accounting processes, because that then helps inform your decision-making and prioritisation exercises as you loop through an iteration of understanding how projects have gone and you learn from those experiences. Some questions for you to consider as you step through value for money considerations. Sorry, Jess, there should be another slide before that. Is there not? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I can talk to them. Four matters for you to consider. Firstly, economy. Are you acquiring resources at the best possible cost? Secondly, efficiency. Are you utilising the resources you already have to maximise outcomes? Effectiveness. Are you achieving intended outcomes for your community? And equity. Are benefits and costs fairly distributed now and into the future? And you'll also be considering a feedback loop to learn from your experience of the work that you're undertaking, to then inform how you develop greater efficiencies the next time round. And it's not just about procurement, it's about all the services you deliver, and your business is broad in scope. But clearly you have a big capital program. So you've completed 9 major infrastructure capital projects within the last financial year. And your value for money considerations as part of those projects goes beyond the pure cost financial benefit, and considering environmental benefits and the resilience and function of those future flood mitigation projects that you're putting in place. So just to conclude on that, measuring value can be really challenging. And because there is work to do in the sector, it's a focus for the work of this office. And it will be an ongoing focus for the term of Grant in his 7 years. So we already have resources there to help, but we will be looking to put into place further work programme items that put a spotlight on good practice, offer guidance, and enable public sector to really develop its maturity around value for money. Look, I'll leave that topic there and move on and hand over to Leon on the role and the value of the audit.
But yeah, just when would you like questions, Richard. Are there some natural breaks through the presentation, or
Yeah, look, happy to be interrupted any time.
careful what you ask for?
Yeah, that's right. It's look, happy to pause there and take questions on the topic I've just covered.
Okay, yep, let's do that, because the way the heads are nodding, I believe there are some questions around the room. So Gary.
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, it's interesting, and just last week we had a meeting here, and it was made in the room. What about how councillors lack respect, and they aren't valued, local government are valued, and it comes down to, I think, and I've been pondering that comment over the last few days, and it is around value for money. I think our constituents don't think they get good value for money from their rate bill at councils, and I think because respect is earned, and we don't have it. I don't feel as local government we don't have that respect in our communities because we don't deliver value for money. So how is that not the best criteria, is how we're respected and how valued in the communities? Because you talk about best practice and on projects, but is that the key? So the question, I suppose, is that the key criteria, or is it the day-to-day running of the council, which is really harder to audit?
I think I guess there's two components. For your business and the performance measures, the non-financial performance measures that you have that support you as governors and support the understanding of the community as to what you're achieving for the money that you're spending. It's really important to have meaningful performance measures, meaningful targets, and to be able to report clearly and effectively against those, because that then starts to tell the community, as well as yourselves as governors, how you're doing, the value that's being achieved for the public money that's being spent, the outcomes that are being delivered. So you then establish a line of sight for your community, that they can understand what the council is delivering for the rates that you're levying from them. In terms of your business as usual and your activities that support the performance targets that you might have, we will touch on that, I think, later in the session, in terms of that often comes down to the public's trust and confidence in how you're operating as an organisation. So that's obviously both governors and your leadership and the staff within the organisation. And that really touches on matters such as acting with integrity, acting in a way that maintains the public's trust and confidence in you as an organisation. So in everything you do, you're always in the spotlight. And it's living those values and demonstrating those day in, day out for those other areas of your business and how you operate that you can't easily demonstrate through specific performance measures relating to specific activities that your council's involved with delivering.
Thanks, Richard. Noel.
Yeah, probably two strings to this. So value for money, I was interested when you first said that in your opening, because value for money goes both ways. And this is my 7th term as a local government politician. So I've always been concerned about the cost of audit fees and whether that's true value for money. So don't want to open a can of worms, but the system that we operate within is not nimble. And whilst I have no issues with transparency and all the other things that go with local government, we have so many in our community pushing us at the moment to take the likes of land, drainage, and the river systems schemes, etc., out of council and into an independent body, be it a CCO or a limited liability company, so as to get the efficiencies, responsiveness and the likes, which is not evident in local government. And please, I don't intend to offend, but sitting where you are and talking as you are, and I was in central government before I got into this local government. So we're sounding like bureaucrats, and I know bureaucrats fall into a trap. So it's a difficult position because at OAG, I absolutely respect where it's coming from, but the systems that's enforced on councils do not make them cost effective. It actually limits the ability for example, and I know our finance chair uses this example as I do within ICM, integrated catchment, is where a job was done that cost $30,000, but by the time it went on the books, it cost over 60,000 because of the internal costs associated with that job. So the burden costs, as we call them. So value for money, I'm not sure that we are getting it and able to deliver it. So I don't know whether you're able to comment on that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
There's quite a lot in there. I can perhaps most easily comment in terms of your reflection around the value you get from the audit. And I think in recognising as a first stated priority the need to modernise Audit New Zealand, it's a recognition that we need to look at ourselves as well around the value for money that we provide and the value of the audit service specifically. In terms of the scope of the audits that we undertake, that's set by legislation, so we don't have intrinsic discretion around the scope of the audit. Certainly there is, and Leon can speak to that in terms of the risk assessment and the testing that supports the audit process. But there's a limitation there. I would say that we are part of a broader conversation, and we've positioned ourselves around where should the scope of and the work that's involved in council's long-term plans, where should that go in terms of both the work that councils need to undertake to deliver long-term plans, but also the associated audit. And we're on record as saying that there's certainly time for the scope of the LTP to be reviewed, and the DIA are kicking off a piece of work around that. I don't know the timing of that relative to this long-term planned round, but we certainly will be part of that conversation, but there will be a process, obviously, that they will need to follow as they report on make their recommendations around that. But I guess I'm just saying that to illustrate that there is a recognition that those kinds of matters and that level of bureaucracy, as you've mentioned, should be the subject of scrutiny and review to ensure that they remain fit for purpose, and that the flow and effect in terms of cost and value for money is balanced.
We were concerned about the cost of rates and so on. So anyway, thank you for those comments.
Leon.
Through your worship, tēnā koutou katoa councillors. Yeah, I said I'm Leon Peters. Please don't try and pronounce my surname. Even I struggle sometimes. And I'm an audit director based in Hamilton. We met very briefly last year at your adoption meeting because there was quite a bit of change in your council, and I actually audited with Janine's help the annual report for the 2025 year. So just a little bit about myself. I've been auditing local authorities since I joined the office in 2008. These include city councils, district councils, regional councils, and council-controlled organizations. Yeah, I think the others fall outside the local authority sphere. And over the years, I've been asked a few times, so what is the value of the audit? And I think Richard already mentioned the program that is happening at the moment in our office. Because if I look at 2008, what we did, if I then look at 2016, what we did, and if I add another 8 years, look at 24, 25, what we're doing, after the old Arthur Anderson scare of auditors, there was such a focus on quality that we just added more and more resourcing, more and more rules, more and more standards. And I'm not sure that's helpful. It's almost like, please don't repeat this, the accounting standards if you look at your annual report, I don't know how many of your ratepayers will read it. And you asked Councillor about what, how the public see you. It's about what you tell them. And they're not necessarily going to read the whole annual report, but they're going to read the summary. And they're going to read not news articles, publications, not publications. Sorry, my English is not always, even after all these years, up to scratch with my brain. But what you put out there for them to understand what you're doing. Now, I know, but unfortunately, to convince ratepayers at a barbecue, that's rather difficult. So from my perspective, if people ask me what you get from the audit, it's pure and simple. It is the audit itself. It is what you get from the audit report. So if you look at the annual report that you put out, it tells ratepayers, it tells you that there is integrity in the information in that annual report. It's also can be seen as an independent health check, that it gives Parliament, ratepayers, and elected members assurance that the financial information as well as performance reporting is free of material errors. Now, we have to apply materiality because we can't afford to audit every single transaction. That will just be an even higher cost. So for that reason, we apply materiality. And if you have a look at my audit plan, which is going to the Risk and Assurance Committee in the middle of March, we actually set out not only how we calculate materiality and why we've got it, but also how much it is. And it's up to you to tell me, nah, that's too high. Unfortunately, you can't tell me it's too low because I have a standard that I have to apply. But yeah, so what we do audit, so on an annual basis, we audit the annual report, which is the financial statements and the statement of service performance. And then under current legislation, Richard touched on that, we also audit the LTPs every 3 years. This is all included in the Local Government Act. So it's rather difficult for us to say, let's cut out bits of the audit until the Act is changed or the auditing standards are changed. The good thing about the current Auditor General, he's really focused on efficient audits. And I think you will see benefit. Well, I hope you do, sir. If you don't, talk to me. We don't audit the annual plan. We do audit it if it leads to an LTP amendment, which falls under the legislation again. I really encourage you to consider me as your critical friend and to talk to me. And my details are available on our website, and Janine and Chris both have it, a few other people. But get in touch with me if there's anything, because I need to understand, I think I understand your key decisions and these assumptions you make, because I read a lot and I talk to your management and staff, and we haven't yet, but Warren, we will have a few conversations as well, and to make sure that I'm on top of what the risks are that's facing you. Shall I carry on with a few responsibilities? There's not much left.
Finish responsibilities and then I'll come to questions. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Leon.
I'll keep this short. I'm not usually talking this much, but I'm quite enjoying this. First of all, elected members' responsibilities. Please consider my audit report, and especially if I include a qualification or an emphasis of matter paragraph or another matter paragraph. There's a reason for that, and there's a big issue that needs to be addressed urgently. Then look further than that and look at my report to council. We have issued 2 reports. The one comes to you, to the Assurance Committee, and then there's one going to management, which is of course available to you. That's at a very detailed level. I would look at the report to council if I were you. Foster a culture of continuous improvement. Have a look at how key issues are addressed by your management and staff. And you've got good people in the local government sector. So they just need your encouragement, but also, like us, have to be held to account. And it's also your role to ensure that that management implement controls. And these controls should be audited once in a while. Don't just rely on the external audit, because I spoke about materiality earlier. That's rather high level. You have an internal audit function. If you're concerned about any area, focus on that. Do a deep dive. I've heard that name called a few times, and yeah, and have a look at where there are issues. What is my responsibility? My responsibility, well, office as far as the audit is concerned, is to deliver a quality audit, but efficiently, as Grant said, and Richard touched on it as well. To have a good working relationship with you, with your risk and assurance committee, with management staff, without becoming friends, because our independence is critical. So, sorry, I can't invite you to a barbie, but we need to have a really good working relationship, especially with management. And we've been asked in the past, but can you just tell us the answer? Because you know, you've seen this. If I've seen it at the council, at a different council entity, I will point you to that. I can't tell you, because if I tell you I have to audit my own work, that doesn't help. But if I say, why don't you talk to Bay of Plenty Regional Council? They had the same issue, and they dealt with it in a certain way. Then your management, and we do that, and your management can then talk to them. As far as management is concerned, make sure you're ready for the audit. You don't need auditors sitting here for 2 months. They waste your time, and that's not efficient either. So be ready, give us good information, timely as we require it. We'll get in and out as soon as possible. Make sure your staff have the expertise, and if they don't, which we don't always have it, we buy it in. I would recommend buying it in. And I know that is actually value for money, because otherwise, who's going to get to the correct answer if you don't get to that last information? Or sorry, get expert advice on certain items. I think that's enough from me. I'm looking forward to working with you, and I encourage you to get.
Thanks, Leon. We'll go to questions now. Chris, did you have a question?
Leon, thanks once again for being here with us, and also for you, Richard. This question I asked before Christmas when you were here, and I'm going to ask it again, because I have received some pushback from management on the topic of reporting on climate change. Your audit report, to prove that I read it, I've read it, because I did raise this, excluding an opinion on it because you said the information was unauditable and it was unverifiable. I understand that totally. My question was at the time, why would we bother collecting the data and reporting on it if it cannot be confirmed as being accurate and correct? We have legislation now which exempts the regional council and any entity below a certain threshold, and we are well below that threshold from reporting information. Information collection and reporting costs money. I'm one who wants to stop spending, all right? So I'm seeking your support for a change in our policy regarding the information collection for climate change, and also you might want to care to comment on it. May not be significant, may not be appropriate to do so. Will that save us some audit costs at the end of the year? So that's my first question.
Right. Shall I answer?
Yes,
I think it's easier if we do one question at a time. So first of all, the climate change, that is up to you. I can't support or even criticize you if you either report against it or not report against it. If you have to report against it because it's a requirement, then that's a different story. But as long as you don't report against it, there's nothing for me to audit. And yeah, that is absolutely your cost.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just go to Chris McClay. Yep.
Warren, do you think?
Yep.
Thank you. Just to say that the first test obviously is whether you're obligated to report, but bear in mind that you will have a set of climate actions as well. So depending on what your targets and your aspirations around that are, and the associated measures to demonstrate your progress, that may lead you to collect certain data and report on certain aspects. I don't know your situation, but that would be a consideration potentially as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to follow up the councillor's question, because I think it's something that we are looking for absolute clarity on. I think we've got the idea that there is no obligation to report. Question is, are there any obligations to be collecting information in case we are asked to report? And I think that's just a little bit that if it's clearly no, then I think we're all very, very clear of what we need to do and don't need to do. As it's a little bit grey, it gets awkward for us.
Obviously, we can't provide you with legal advice as to what your situation is. You may need to address that for yourself. But what I would say is that you know, I'm aware that you're is it a reputable authority? So the minister may ask you to report your emissions. So the question then is, to be prepared to do that, would you have had to have collected the data even though you're not reporting against that data? There's where my kind of input ends, I think.
I may just add to that. Wouldn't it be a good idea to ask the minister? Are you going to ask us for information over the next few years? Because we're not going to collect this information because it's expensive.
Did you have another one, Chris?
Really, just, no, I'll leave it there, I think, probably the best idea, because Leon will be back and talking to us again as a group before and after the audit. So that's my next question. Is probably better to wait till then.
Keith.
Yes, thanks guys for coming in and giving us your time and perspective. Leon, in your presentation so far, you offered to be our friend, and I'm just wanting to know how much of a friend you want to be of us. So my question goes back to what Gary and Noel indicated in terms of value. And one of the big issues we've got at the moment, not only do we have to run the organisation, but we have to prepare for the next organisation that comes. And as newbies, and there's a few of us in this room, part of the reason we're in here is because we are not happy with the way the local government system has been going. And we are aware that a lot of it is by government decree and by legal ramifications. But are you in a position to give us guidance as we submit to the government on the things that are costing us money? And I'll give an example because it was something we talked about the other day, and Chris McClay had a little word in my ear afterwards, is our health and safety requirements over the top. And we can go forward to a new entity, but if we don't change that, we're not going to get those savings. So my question directly to you is, if we come to you, whether it's behind the back door or what, can you give us a list of things that we need to go to government on and say, sort this shit out before we go forward? Otherwise, it's not going to make any difference.
Thank you, Councillor. Critical friend, yes. It is the friend who's critical about your performance, so he's willing to speak up. But I'm not adversarial. I think we can do that in a very robust, though professional manner. No, I cannot talk to you about things that's outside the scope of my audit. The scope of the audit is purely about historical information, annual report, financial statements, and a statement of service performance, looking forward the LTP. Health and safety, I stay away from as far as possible because I'm definitely not an expert. And I think my role is set in the Local Government Act.
Can I just
yes,
comment?
please.
One important thing to note about the role of the Auditor General is the Auditor General is independent from the government. So we're an officer of Parliament, and our legislation, our Public Audit Act, that sets up the Auditor General and creates him, makes it very clear that we're not allowed to comment on government policy. So the questions that you're raising today about the problems with the Local Government Act or other issues that you have, we're actually not allowed to talk about those things. We get to audit the stuff that Parliament says has to be audited, and that's the limit of in terms of whether or not something should be, the health and safety rules and so. I know that the government did announce recently that they were going to shake up the changes to health and safety and make less onerous on employers and organisations, and I think that there might be some. So that's not, we can't help you.
Thanks for that clarity, Belinda. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to sort of dovetail back to the climate reporting. Yeah, just, I know we've got the Local Government Act, but just thinking about the Land Transport Act as well, and where that sort of dovetails in with the Local Government Act and measuring and reporting requirements as well, how that relates to us.
Best to be an expert on that. I don't have enough knowledge to meaningfully comment. Does come back though to it needs to be considered, I think, around, and you may need to take some advice for yourselves around what your obligations are in that space. It's not this office's position to be able to provide you that advice. I can provide some insights, which I've kind of attempted to do in terms of some of the other reasons why you might be collecting information.
Okay. Yep, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Did you want to add to that, Belinda? No. That's all good. Gary.
As a member of the race control team and a newbie on the scene here myself, how can we use the information from your audit to the best advantage?
So when you consider rates, you first of all have to decide how much money you need to be covered by rates. So you start with expenditure. And when we do the long-term plan, you come up with a plan with a budget and say, this is the expenditure we believe we're going to use. That's the information we audit. So then you set your rates based on that budget, that long-term plan, and then the annual plan, which we don't audit, as I said earlier. But from our audit is we look at a few things, we're touching on sensitive expenditure later, and also one should consider not only expenditure as in itself. During the audit, we have a look at how it's been spent. Has there been a contract? Has it been lawful? So that is about how much you can take from my audit when you set the rates. Because if I understand it correctly, that is how you set rates. Decide what the expenditure is, how much you're going to loan fund, how much should be from rates.
Thank you, Leon. If there's no other questions, we'll move on with the presentation.
I had my button on way before them and you went past me.
Wave at me because it's not on my list.
Well,
Sorry, Robbie. Where you go?
Mine would be around, so when you're ordering our finances and depreciation comes up in it, how do you assess that if we're doing any good in that spot or not? Because that's just about after we build infrastructure, the biggest cost of maintaining that asset after that is depreciation. So that's the huge bigger, like we can all go and build a new asset. We haven't got issue with that. And even if we got the council out, we could build the asset for half the amount. But the cost going forward that we struggle with being sustainable was actually the depreciation cost of that asset over time. So in that spot, how could you, as councillors, I don't know if you can help us or not, but that's where some of the tricky stuff, like in long term, is when it gets sticky for us.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. It's also the long-term planner, a big part of your budget going forward. So if you look at the revaluation reserves, because you get the revaluations that gets done on your assets. And part of that is not only this is the value, it also says this is the life of the asset. And based on that, management for each asset class come up with a depreciation percentage which basically calculates your depreciation on the value of the asset. And that is where what you can focus on, and that is what you can scrutinize.
Yeah, but what we're struggling is that asset could be in 80 years, could be 5 times the value of the original cost of it. That's the bit that gets unaffordable.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's part of the accounting standards.
Right, we'll move on with the presentation.
Not the guys we should be arguing with about costs then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Audit and risk is this your part, Paul?
This is my part to kick off,
Okay.
Chair.
Sorry to wake you up.
I wondered if we can kick this off, Jess, with that video. Thank you.
Council's Audit and Risk Committee helps support and enhance good governance and accountability. Audit and Risk Committees are not there to make policy decisions or set strategy. They are there to help you as an elected member. How exactly? They help you understand your strategic risks and whether you're doing enough to lessen them. They scrutinise and challenge your council's financial and non-financial management and systems. They help you understand whether your council's strategies are achieving their intended objectives, and they test and challenge new ideas. The most effective audit and risk committees have 4 key characteristics. They are independent, so they can test, challenge and advise your council. They have clarity of purpose. They are competent with the right mix of skills and experience, and they have open and effective relationships. Your Audit and Risk Committee is there to advise and help elected members like you with issues and decisions that may have impacts lasting decades. Every council should have an Audit and Risk Committee, ideally with at least 2 independent members, one being the chair. Because independent members are impartial, they can more readily ask the hard questions and ensure that the committee remains focused on the major issues. If you want more information about Audit and Risk Committees, take a look at our website or talk to council staff or our office.
Yeah, so the Audit and Risk Committee is quite a unique committee in your structure. And as the video sets out, it's an important check and balance in your council's overall system of internal control. And it provides that independent advice and assurance to council on your governance, your risk management and your internal control. And that you're identifying the right current and the right emerging risks. And finally, it ensures that the appropriate and right-sized mitigations are in place. And it provides independent assurance that those mitigations are actually happening. Talked about in the video an independent chair, and you have that structure, and we're seeing increasingly that councils across the country are maturing in that space, and they have that independent contribution to the membership of the committee. An important aspect is that the Audit and Risk Committee, it enhances governance and risk management, but it doesn't replace that responsibility on the overall governing body. But its impartiality and its ability to challenge are key. And that in itself requires open and honest communication, those open and effective relationships, which the video covered. It doesn't make decisions. It doesn't have powers and responsibility other than those related to its risk and assurance mandate. but it does make recommendations to the CE or council, and it does play an important role in setting the risk management culture of council. Have the next slide, Jess, thanks. So touching on those 4 points of what makes an effective committee, that independence is imperative in terms of being able to test and challenge your council. And you need to carefully consider the amount and nature of independence that you need from your committee. That's in terms of the independence from management, the independence from the remainder of your council committees, but also the independence and the knowledge that comes into the committee from those external members. And the independent chair, we believe, is often the best way to promote that free and frank debate during committee meetings. And it gives you the assurance that you're receiving that independent advice and assurance. In terms of clarity of purpose, to get the best out of your committee, you do need to be clear about what you want from your committee. So it's important to have clarity of expectations on both sides, being clear about the committee's purpose to help it stay focused. Sometimes we see committees that are broad in scope and they include a finance function as well. Yours is properly termed the Risk and Assurance Committee because it's around risk first and foremost. And if you have a broader set of functions that involve decision making around financial matters, then that can both compromise your independence, but also dilute the time and the energy and the focus of the Risk and Assurance Committee on that key topic of risk and management of that risk. Jess, could I have the next one, please? So turning to risk, put simply, a risk is an uncertain event that affects the achievement of your council's objectives. And you will know, you'll have an innate sense of what's keeping you awake at night and worrying you the most when you think of the business of your council. So identifying, understanding and managing those risks is a fundamental part of your role of as governors of your council. And the Audit and Risk Committee is a powerful advisory group to you in applying its expertise to canvass and identify those strategic risks and identify appropriate mitigations to moderate those risks. The nature of those risks then comes to who you might consider are the best people and the best skill sets to incorporate and bring onto that committee, be it skill sets that exist within your council group or those that you don't see within your council group that may then inform how you select independent members. And that changes over time, both in terms of those risks, but also that independent membership should transition over time so that you refresh that critical thinking and that challenge of new thinking can be brought to bear to inform how the committee is going about its work. It's important that risk is discussed in an open and transparent manner, that you can ask direct questions and expect honest, direct answers. And the culture within the committee should be safe for management to answer those questions. And the committee should be able to identify the type and level of information that it needs in its reports that it receives from officers to undertake its business, to assess those risks and to manage those risks. So elected members should be establishing a tone at the top that promotes a risk-aware culture. Set your council's risk approach. Be informed about the measures that management is taking regarding significant risks. And ensure that your activities are well controlled. Have the next slide, Jess, thanks. So in terms of the focus of committees, as I've said, it's really primarily around that risk management and those systems of internal controls. You have assurance through your primarily through your internal audit function, and I think you have KPMG advising you on that. It's changed, is it? Okay, right, okay, yeah. And you have that reporting to you around financial and non-financial measures, and then the external audit relationship as well, which Leon has spoken to. Your work program is really important to delivering that. Audit and risk committees, and I think yours does, it meets on a quarterly basis. So you have a limited amount of time, and you need to have that focus, and an efficient work program derived from that risk management framework and those strategic risks that you've identified is a really important part of an efficient functioning of an audit or risk committee. And we recommend that you have a program that allows you to do deep dives into those external risks from time to time. So a platform where you can have officers of the council along to advise you to set out how those risks are being mitigated for the assessment of those of the committee and the critical analysis of the committee on how effective that existing management is. So to conclude, we want every council to have an audit and risk committee with an independent chair. The audit and risk committee should enhance your governance and risk management, but it doesn't replace it. And impartiality and the ability to challenge are key. That requires those open and honest relationships within the committee, between the committee and council management, and between the committee and your external auditor, who is another independent external lens and a point of assurance for you as you step through governing around risk management.
Thanks, Richard. We'll go to questions. Keith.
Yeah, thanks for that, Richard. Again, I'm sort of coming back to the value that you can add in your role, and I'm not trying to belittle it because you are prescribed by government within certain things, and Belinda explained that unfortunately too well from my point of view, because you basically live in a safe silo and we can't rattle you. I'd just like some more clarity about, so we've got risk assurance, which you're saying we've got it in the right context, but you then in your presentation said, well, the finance part, but keep that out of it. Whereas I'm saying in governance, we've got a responsibility to make sure everything's done at the best possible cost. Otherwise, if you allow risk and assurance to dominate, which I think, and I'm not criticising Chris and his team at all, but I think is very prevalent in local government, is that they will protect themselves regardless of the cost. So can you just explain how we can get more pressure to keep the costs down on the risk and assurance and get best value for the dollar?
Well, I guess if you have an effective set of controls in place, for one, then you'll minimise your risk around the nature of be it fraud, be it inefficiency across the spectrum of what you do. The value of the Audit and Risk Committee is really around those identifying what's strategically important, and what are your key points of risk that really bring into question the ability of the organisation to operate with trust and confidence, and in a way that has that effectiveness and efficiency. I think one of the key things that I can offer is we have a bunch of resources that support audit and risk committees. So we have a regular audit and risk committee chairs forum, and that covers topics, be it Treasury updates on macroeconomic conditions. It could be artificial intelligence and the risks around that, cyber security, and the risks to a council organisation around that. There's a bunch of topics that we make available to audit and risk chairs that can inform and help evolve a council's understanding of its risk environment, which in itself is a preventative measure then to prevent some of those that harm being caused to the organisation. And a lot of our publications are focused in that area as well. So there's a bunch of resources that the office has available to you as a reference point that can leverage some of the issues that you'll be grappling with as your Audit and Risk Committee meets.
Well, yeah, it's going to come to you.
A good question. How much is enough? So I think there's two sides to that. First is one of the roles of council working with the committee is to be clear about risk appetite. And oftentimes people say, oh, well, we don't want to take any risk. We don't want things to go wrong. And so we set low risk appetites. And then surprise, management spends a lot of money making sure that you get there. So being realistic about the risk that council's prepared to take issue by issue, I think is an important part of that. And I think it's important for councillors to engage actively in that risk appetite. It's not a theoretical discussion. It sort of looks a bit like a theoretical discussion, but it actually drives the behaviours. And then the value for money side of risk management, I don't think is the role of the committee, but it's more the role of, I think you've got a scrutiny of management. I'm not sure where you look at your finances, but that sort of, how much is enough and where we go, that sort of discussions have to happen there. And then if the committee thinks that you've gone too cheap, well, we'll certainly tell you, but
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that clarifies it, Paul. And as you're all well aware, we now look at our finance committee as finance and performance, which is where that works into your sort of questioning, Keith. Just while I've got everyone's attention, I'd just like to hand over my apologies to both Paul and Graham, unfortunately, for the mix-up in the timing schedules this morning. And just some clarity that you'll be aware in the last council meeting, we discussed extending or offering Graham Naylor another employment contract, and then the rotating of roles to allow Paul to become the chair of that, and Graham steps down to the second independent. So they have accepted that, and that will be ratified through the first risk and assurance meeting. So just for that clarity for councillors, I don't think I articulated it to everybody. Gary.
Paul, following up from that discussion you're just having, because I see probably the biggest risk is we don't know what we don't know, and then what we cover, and sure as night, fellas say, the one incident, whether it be cyber or structural or whatever else, it's going to be the one that you didn't know see coming. So it's that whole value for money equation again, so whether you pay for a 1 in 50-year event or a 1 in 100-year event or a 1 in 200-year event, and how do we, so it's probably covering what you've already covered, but is it easy for us to give direction to management to strike the right balance between 50, 100 or 200-year events, whether they be cyber or anything else, because that's your risk appetite, and if you budget for a 1 in 200-year event, normally the cost of that just seems to outdo, just say a shorter profile and pay less, but then you're going to get caught out. So it's that balance, but talking around in circles. But how do we get balance? I suppose is what I'm saying between that and how do we cover for the event we don't foresee?
yeah. So every discipline, every issue will have its own way of thinking about it. But you've mentioned cyber. So cyber, the best approach is to get an independent review of your maturity in the framework that's probably the best to use is called NIST, N-I-S-T. And so you want to set again a target. So it's a 1 to 5 score. We might say, let's just be 3, shall we? 3 is enough for us. And then if your maturity is reaching that, then you can say, well, that's about right. So it's a game like that. But if I'm, with the ARC, there's a whole bunch of stuff which is table stakes. It's not very exciting. It's possibly a bit boring sometimes. But you've got, if you're going to run a council, you've got to have internal controls. You've got to have controls over the basic cash, the procurement, the systems. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on, and it appears in the work stream one way or another. And it's it's the mundane stuff. And so the committee does that and sort of helps council. We're here to help. It's always back to council. But the question for me in this role is always, but how do we add value? What's the value for money out of the committee? And so it's the emerging risks or what's going to change, and I think that's where the councillors bring a lot of skill to the board, because they know the particular situation. And if I'm looking here, it's your major assets, and what are you designing them for, and when are you going to change that in terms of climate change, extreme weather events? That will have its own technical approach, which in the same way I described with cyber, and that comes down to your asset management people. So there's a lot of thought there, and that's where the real big money is. I mean, we can spend a bit too much on health and safety, yes or no, I don't know, but it's nothing like whether we get those big management systems right or wrong. Yeah. So I don't know if that's confused.
So just follow up. So should we, and I'm not sure, Chris, maybe you already know the answer to this, and I haven't asked it of management, but should we employ external expertise like, say PwC, they've got cybersecurity expertise within there to give us advice on that, or where do we go with that?
We do. Yep. So there's an independent review. The last report gave us that NIST score, gave us a comparison against our peers, and said we were doing better than most local government. So you've got to ask yourself, but I think that's a reflection of where we should be as opposed to where others aren't. Yes, so there are occasions that would happen. The health and safety management system again, but so not all the time. Every 2, 3, 4 years, it depends on the risk. There are times to bring those people in, and then other times we simply get an internal audit to say, it's PwC now to say, is this good enough? Has it reached the standard? And I guess we can test them on that too. In fact, we can start to think about value for money when they do their exercises, that it's not just making everything bulletproof, that it's the right amount of protection. I mean, it's a great challenge, and I guess risk management's come from a background like you described with audit. You had these failures, and all the auditors got sued. So what do you know? The auditors got more careful, and that's kind of how the industry went. And in risk management, historically, it hasn't been brilliant, and we've had things happen, and we've recently seen a major event, and you can ask yourself about that. So risk management has been a developing thing, but that question, what's enough, is a good challenge, and I'll start thinking about that more for this coming year.
Thanks for that, Paul. Chris?
Yeah, it's a really good and important question that you asked. And like Paul says, that as long as we focus on key risks and not everything, because you can't be across everything all the time. And I think there's an internal audit program to try and identify those things where you do want to dig deeper into and get some independent views on. And Paul, you set that, don't you? For whatever basis, so you can see the cycle at which these things are going to be reviewed, and that's a very important part of the whole risk and assurance program.
And just from my point of view, Gary, having sat on that risk and assurance committee, is the fact that as things evolve around the country, you identify things you didn't know before, and that sort of thing. One of the things that springs to mind is the ports of Auckland and the death up there with the container, and all of a sudden the CE's in court, being completely liable and all that sort of thing. So there's events happen all around the country that all of a sudden it does wake you up to potential risk as well as what you're looking into in regular reviews and things like that. Robbie.
Yeah, mine's pretty much down the same line as Gary's, but mine is our this organisation doesn't like taking much risk at all. And then I think it actually fails because it doesn't take risk. That it becomes so bureaucratic and everything else that actually the system fails in the end anyway. And we've had a couple of things like the barge and Mangataupi 3, and all these are things that there's been failure because it's so intensive taking the risk out of it that they oversee some really simple things at times. And that's the bit I'm really struggling with in this organisation. We're nearly 2 years out now that a barge should have been supplied and it still isn't here. And it's been put as one of the big risks the whole way through this organisation since I've been elected, of an $8 million asset, and it still hasn't turned up. But so I understand what risk and insurance is, but sometimes I think we over quantify it, that we don't actually get anything done. And that's I think what Gary was trying to say as well, that we got to be very careful of what risk appetite actually is, because anyway, I think I'm mostly digging a hole for myself.
Yeah, I'm not sure there was a question in there. Chris, you put your light on.
I just want to take issue with what Robbie's saying. Blaming council for the barge is just clearly not right. Nothing to do with this council. It might have been over-engineered. Somebody experimented that, and we accepted, or the previous council accepted that. The fact that it's 2 years late has got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with this council.
And it hasn't got anything to do with the Office of the Auditor General. So let's so we need, let's stick with the program.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
don't want to go into management issues.
No, this is about health and safety and the risk appetite.
Yep.
My daughter's a senior HR lawyer, and she said to me in my operation of the farm, she said, "Dad, if anything ever goes wrong," and the question that I should always ask, could you have done something more? If you are honest and say, yes, I could have done, you're screwed. So that's the situation that the chief executive is in. If the chief executive does not do everything that is needed to be done or identified as being done, the organisation's in the crap. So we've just got to remember the legal ramifications. The chief executive always saying back off on the risk. Now, I'm not trying to defend the organisation. I'm just telling you what reality is, as far as my lawyer who put her legal hat on and told me won't answer the question. Okay.
Yep. Thanks for that insight. No, Gary.
Just got a question whether this organisation is heavy on consultants, as has been asserted in the past. That was one of the things brought up during the election campaign. Whether that is because the organisation tries to be risk averse, staff are
Gary, I'm going to stop you there because I think you're heading into a management type question. We've got the Office of the Auditor General here, which won't have any insight on where you're going from what I can understand, but I'm happy for you to clarify that if I'm reading it wrong.
No, you're probably right.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on with the presentation.
Thank you. Just one overriding comment before we go to conflicts of interest. I think it just demonstrates the value of those open, frank conversations. The Audit and Risk Committee provides you that independent point of advice around your risks and how you might manage them. It's up to you to determine your risk appetite and the affordability of what you have before you to manage. Just urge you to continue that dialogue and that open and honest conversation, and make the culture of your committee and your relationships supportive of that conversation.
Thanks for that, Richard. Now, just before we move into this section, we do have the ability to go into public excluded if anyone wants to discuss private details with conflicts of interest and that sort of thing.
Mr. Chair, I think we should, because there's a number of us in the room who are on the river committees. We're landowners, farmers. We're talking water issues. I know there's a request, or one's been formulated to go to the OAG, whether that's actually in there or not. But I think I would certainly like to have that free and open discussion rather than it be out there in the wide world.
So you're happy to move?
Yes, I move.
I'll second. All those in favour of moving into public excluded? Opposed? So carried. We'll just get Jess to take care of that. Was that the second race at Ellerslie you were listening to, Paul?